Hi, my name is Courtney Terry, and this is Arts Alive. It is a production of the Arts Alliance of Yamhill County. And my guest today is Tyler Crook, the comic book creator, artist, writer, letterer. I mean, creator really does sum it up, because it's like all the things.
The whole shebang. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And we have some of your works here. And so you started, tell me how you started.
I started with this. This is my very first book, Petrograd. And that one I got, basically I had been working in video games. I'd been working in video games for about 12 years and was very tired of it. And comics is something that I had always loved and something that I'd always wanted to do. So I started putting together a portfolio, and I went to the Stumptown Comics Fest in Portland, and they had a very nice portfolio review set up there. And so I showed my portfolio to a couple of editors, and James Lucas Jones, who was the editor at Oni Press at the time, sort of said, you know, I have this project on my desk that you might be really good for. And it turned out to be Petrograd, which was written by Phil Gillette. And so yeah, that was my first thing. It took me about 2.5 years, just nights and weekends working on that thing. And it's like 250 pages. Yeah. And it was a big project. And if I knew how intense that was going to be, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I'm incredibly grateful that I did, because it turned out to, you know, that project sort of led me to get a lot of other work. And now I'm at a point where I'm doing my own creator-owned stuff, and it's very exciting.
That's so exciting. And I love Oni Press. I love the graphic novels and comics that they put out, and it's cool that was started. And then moving on to, because you were with Dark Horse Comics, and you did some, was it Hellboy related?
It was Hellboy related. It was a spin-off called BPRD Hell on Earth. Yes. Pleasant name for the kids.
Yes.
And that story was about, you know, if you've seen the Hellboy movies, it's where the BPRD is where Hellboy worked. So the comic that I worked on was about like everyone except for Hellboy, basically. Nice. And all their adventures.
Which is such a fun, it's such a fun concept when you have like the star main character, and and like in honestly, any movie, any book, you always wonder like about the side characters.
Yeah.
And like the extra that you see walk across the back, and the extra, and I love, the idea of going in and exploring like what are the rest of the people doing in the background at that time.
My very favorite issue I ever worked on with that was an issue called The Grind, and that one was actually about a barista. Because, you know, in the world, it's like, you know, it's the apocalypse and all these giant monsters are appearing on Earth, and everything's in upheaval. And there was this one issue that was just about a barista who's like trying to get to work in the course of a day, and he has to like go past like swaths of Santa Fe that have been destroyed by monsters and stuff. And that one was very fun because it was just about a normal guy.
Yes. Yeah. What are normal people doing when all these crazy events are happening? Yeah. And was that a bit of a trip going from this intense 2.5 year book to doing more serialized stuff?
It was tough because the switch was sort of going from having a day job and doing comic books nights and weekends to doing comic books as a full-time job, and that was a pretty big switch for me, because, you know, video games pays very well, and comic books pays significantly not as well. So that was a big adjustment for me, but one I was very happy to make in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so from there you moved, and so Harrow County, and what is that your own? Is that still published under?
It's a Dark Horse book.
Dark Horse book, and then there's. I just looked. There's like 6 volumes altogether.
There are 8. So there's a bunch of different formats you can buy Harrow County in. It's available in a lot of different ways. So what we have on the table here are the Omnibus Editions.
Yes.
So you can get the whole story in these 2 editions. Originally, it was 32 serialized comic books, like magazine books, and then the trade paperback which collects 4 of the serialized books in one book. There's a lot of different ways you can buy it.
Oh yes.
Yeah, but it's a lot of comic books, and this was about a 3-year project for me, getting this guy all done. And this was one of the first issues where I started doing watercolor. Actually, it was the second project, but it was the first one where I felt like I knew what I was doing. Mm-hmm. It was the first big project that I was doing the watercolor paintings on those.
And that's what, and so they're horror comics, horror fantasy comics, which is so rad.
We call Harrow County a Southern Gothic horror fairy tale.
Excellent.
Because that's what it is.
Those are the elements that are involved. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Petrograd is, it's dark, but not as much as
Well, Petrograd is not supernatural.
Right.
It's very, it's historical fiction.
Yes.
So it's fictionalized, but it's based on real historical events that happened. And so they're a very different sort of vibe.
But it's still, and especially the colors are all like, it's the same kind of color, which I guess we can try and show. I don't want to like blend the thing, but so it's very much, which it's interesting, especially compared to some of the where there is so much color, but the impact of it, and just I really like how when
these guys. So this is the contrast. This is all the watercoloring.
So bright.
Yeah.
And it's, and I love that kind of style. Like, it still has just as, like, the story here is just as powerful, and the moments are still, but, like, it's just in the same color. My artistic vocabulary is very impressive, obviously. I have to say, between Harrow County and Manor Black, which is one of your most recent publications, the amount of people that you draw on fire is incredible. Like, I don't know if you would consider that your specialty, but for the record,
I have done, because BPRD had a character whose like power was fire, and then there's a lot of fire magic in Manor Black, and then Harrow County has I hadn't really thought about the fire things.
But no, well, it's terrifying.
That's something that is scary.
And it's just especially using, and this goes for, anytime you're reading a graphic novel compared to like a print book, of having that just blast, like you turn the page and there's this blast of color in your face, and it just, I obviously get excited about it because it is that kind of experience for the reader and that's such a, I think one of the best things about comic books and graphic novels is you're still reading, you still have your imagination that's kind of creating these images in your head, but then you also have the images of the book to go off of, and especially when they're really cool. And I just love how it's just really exciting for the reader, I will say.
I think that, because comics books fill that like really fun space in between like a novel and a movie.
Yeah.
Where it's like a visual medium.
Yes.
But unlike a movie, the reader of a comic book is in control of the pacing that they read it, and the time that they take with each panel, and how you sort of process your way through the story. And there's the gaps in between the panels where the reader has to invent what has happened there to make the continuity. But unlike a novel, the comic book has a much more sort of spatial relationships between things. One of the things that you think about a lot as a comic book writer is the page turn. And when you're writing a novel, like turning a page doesn't really mean anything. But in a comic, it does. It's because you turn that page and all of a sudden you have this image. And if that image was like, if you could see it coming, they wouldn't be as shocking. But if you can hold off till the page turn to have a reveal. Like,
yes.
That sort of stuff is always very fun.
Yes. Yeah. And even when you're like, you turn the page and maybe like the last panel that you see something crazy is going up and you're like, oh,
yeah,
but I got to go back and I got to find out what's happening.
I love that that last panel to see like the little shadow of someone coming up and you're like, oh no, what's going to happen? You have to turn the page to find out.
And I'm curious when you do kind of serialize things, is how much of it is like plotted out ahead in advance? Like, are there some things that's like, we're just going to see where it takes us, or is it more organized than I think it could be?
Different people work differently. Like when I do books like Carroll County, where I'm working with a writer, in this case, Cullen Bunn. Like I have a full script that I'm working from, so I know exactly what each panel is going to contain before I even get started on it. I know a lot of other people, especially if they're writing and drawing, they will sort of work more freeform. That's hard sometimes because I'm working with publishers. I need to convince my editor that this is a thing that needs to be published, ahead of time. So I have to have a pretty solid plan before I get going.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and the page count is pretty strict. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to do a 10-page comic this month. It's like, no, you got to do your 22 pages, Tyler. And, but sometimes you can go a little bit further if like you just take away the ads at the back of the book, that sort of thing. So it's pretty like I know what I'm going to do before I start drawing it for sure. Yeah. And
one of the things I liked about I didn't skip to the end of Man or Black, but I do always like looking at the content in the back. And you have like your whole, like the little sketchbook section. And I love looking at, it goes through the process, but I also really like the different, like the characters. And I love, just seeing kind of those notes from scratch and seeing, and I love it anytime a comic book creator does this, of like seeing a few different types of the character and how how did it started here, but then you felt this way and that way, and how it moved, and it's such a cool process.
That's such a I like reading those. I don't like putting them together.
Fair enough.
But I love reading other people doing it.
Yes,
Well,
fair enough.
And half the time when you're making a comic book, with your deadlines, you really are just cranking through trying to get it's so much work, and you got to get it done so fast that you're just going through it. And then at the end, the editor sends you the email that's like, send me all the process stuff so we can put it in the back. And I'm just like, I don't know where this stuff is.
Come on, man, I just cranked all this out.
I just did it. Can't you just be satisfied with what I'm giving you?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So people can find your, the library has them, I will say. The artists market out in Willamina carries a lot of them. That's on Main Street. Willamina Merchants. And then also available at local booksellers.
Just about any bookshop should be able to order them for you. Your local comic book shop is a great place to go.
But never Amazon.
Nope.
We don't.
Is it bookshop?
Bookshop.org?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one that goes, yes. And then you also have your website.
MrCrook.com.
MrCrook.com, which has, and then a YouTube channel.
I have a YouTube channel. If you just look up Mr. Tyler Crook on YouTube, I'm sure you'll find my channel.
Yes, and it is so cool because you do have a lot of those videos that are time lapses, or you're explaining the artistic. I watched a couple.
Nice.
The artistic process, and it was just, it's really cool too to see that kind of like from beginning to end.
Those are really fun to make, and they're fun for me to watch too, because lots of times, like I said, you're in the moment and you're creating this stuff, and then when I watch it back, I'm always sort of like, what am I doing? Why did I do that? And I get to sort of rediscover my artistic process through watching those.
That was the one thing that I noticed that I was like, oh, that's smart, is you had a glove on this hand.
That's my greasy hand stopper.
Yeah.
Because especially working with watercolor, those fingerprints will leave little...
It's just tools of the trade.
Yeah.
Well, Tyler, thank you so much for coming in and talking about
pleasure.
Your work. This was a lot of fun. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah. And we'll find you online, find you in the library. And hope to see a lot more to come. If anything, I don't know if volume 2 of Man or Black is, but I'm going to be needing
It's
it.
almost
very soon.
out.
Okay, just checking.
And my current project, The Lonesome Hunters, you can get, it's serializing right now, so you can get that at your local comic shop.
Yes, wonderful. Great, well, thank you.
My pleasure.
And thank you. This is Courtney Terry, and this has been Arts Alive.